3 defeats in 2021. Does it feel like the U.S. is becoming a fortress for U.S.-Mexico? Because remember, the U.S. has played Mexico almost always outside of a qualifier at Azteca. The game U.S. always plays Mexico in the U.S. Is it feeling more like a fortress? Question 1. Question 2, is Tata Martino in the hot seat now? Look, they're going to cruise to World Cup qualifying. This is his 6th defeat in charge, and he's in like the 30-plus wins and like 7 draws. He's got a great record. But 3 of those are against the U.S. Is his job, do you think because it's so personal that his job's in jeopardy? Or, and I know we talked to Wiso Vasquez about this stuff, that there's not really another option right now, but do you think it's at least his seat is heating up, or is it just sort of like, tough year? We're still Mexico. We're still going to qualify.
Okay, first, this is the first time the U.S. has beaten Mexico 3 times in a calendar year since 1934 or something crazy.
Yeah,
so
been a while.
Yeah, put that feather in our cap, right? Yeah. So I'll take that. I think if there's sensible leadership at FMF, the Mexican Federation, you're not firing Tata Martino. But I will say that this one probably hurts the most, because if we look at the Nations League final, they were up 2-1 with 15 minutes left to go. We got a set piece to make it 2-2. We win in penalties, or we win off a Christian Pulisic penalty, but Guardado missed his penalty. There's a lot of room for Tata to be like, we got a little unlucky,
It's a game of moments. It's a game of moments.
It is a game of moments, and we got a little unlucky. But after 90 minutes, it was 2-2. Then you go to the Gold Cup final. It was 0-0 after 90 minutes. It wasn't that sexy of a game. It was kind of forgettable, but we end up scoring 3 minutes before penalties. Miles Robinson on another set piece. Again, he could go in there and be like, it's the fine margins. What are you going to do? I don't have my best players out there. Now, tonight, I don't think he actually, especially in that back line, maybe didn't have his best players, but his front 6 were pretty solid. You have some world-class ability in that front 6. And arguably the best front 3 with Tecatito, Raul Jimenez, and Chucky Lozano, even though they did create 2 good chances, when the game got a little bit tighter and the U.S. got a little bit more organized after the second half, that's when I think I'd be the most disappointed as leadership of Mexico. Like, where was that creativity, that ability to take over the game when we needed it? Where were our big chances in the second half? They didn't have any until they started to potentially start to drop balls and play with a little bit more urgency. So that would be where I'd be almost a little bit disappointed from a federation standpoint. But for them to fire him now, who are they going to bring in that has...
What about if they lose to Canada? We had a comment in here that he's not in the hot seat unless they lose to Canada. They're going to Edmonton. That's not a fun place to play, and Canada's hot right now.
That's true. We just saw Daniel Pinto. Daniel Pinto had a comment saying, after this window, if Mexico loses to Canada, Mexico could be in 3rd after this window, which is crazy to think about given how well they started. Now, yes, he would be on the hot seat for sure. I feel like anytime you take over a job of that magnitude, especially the Mexican national team, you're already on the hot seat, even if you haven't done anything. You get the job and people are like, I want him out. He sucks, And that's kind of probably the challenge and the thrill of the job, is that you have those types of stakes when you take over. I think if they do lose to Canada, there's still an element of how did the team play? And tonight, I think he had 45 minutes where they created more than enough opportunities to score. And that second 45 minutes is where I think I'd be the most disappointed if I was a Mexican fan. He's definitely on the hot seat, but still, what I like about it is I don't hear any chatter from a player perspective. And you and I know a couple guys behind the scenes that we could get some of that insight. I think they all really buy into what Tata Martino is doing. And I don't think you can always say that about previous managers. There was always some undercurrent of like, this guy's a clown. He's gotten lucky or whatever it is. Yeah. So he's got some work to do, of course. You got to build that confidence up again. You don't want to lose to the U.S. like they did Dos Cero, because that's what we do. We're going to rub it in your face until the end of January when we play in Azteca. But I would say it's going to depend on how they play against Canada. And then if we beat them again in Mexico City, then I think you will probably strongly consider maybe Tata Martino isn't the right guy.
Yeah. Well, when I think about this Mexico side, Jimmy, and let's go back on a little bit of a short little history. For the U.S., is this the most... first half, again, I don't think it was poor. But when I go to the Nations League, I go, that's the way I remember the U.S. beating Mexico, right? Mexico dominates. Mexico gets a lot of chances. U.S. fights like hell. U.S. wins game. U.S. more disciplined. Qualify for World Cup type of thing, even though we failed in 2018. That's sort of like the way it worked, right? There was a very simple recipe. There was like 3 ingredients in that recipe to make a beautiful World Cup drink, a cocktail. But this one today, you could start to see a little other glimpses. And when I speak specifically about players, I'm talking about Yunus Musa, who brings another element to the game where, oh, you're going to play that tight to me? All right, poof, I'm gone. See ya, I'm splitting up the middle on you. Weston McKennie has the same thing. Tyler Adams has this fighter mentality. We're starting to see these positional specialists that can solve problems that I don't think we ever had. Whereas before it was like, what, are you a fighter? All right, cool. That's a good step towards this national team, is like that sort of fighting spirit. Do you think the U.S. is making way towards a little bit more of an identity and a little bit more of a level playing field in terms of quality with Mexico? Because I always looked at Mexico as better than us on the U.S. team in terms of player for player. The players that they had when I was in that generation, they had players, they had Giovanni Dos Santos, they had Rafa Marquez, they had guys at Barcelona. We now have players at Barcelona and Juventus and these clubs. Do you think we're leveling in that and if perhaps even surpassing the quality of that we're starting to see come through? Because it felt like in that second half, the U.S. was taking it to them more than I remember the U.S. taking it to Mexico in most games.
I think that surpassing feels a little bit strong. I just think that Mexico got some quality. I think where they lack, and somebody said they lack some speed, and that's where we can take advantage of them at times. But usually they made up for their lack of speed with their tactical acumen, their understanding, their superior, let's say, IQ and tactics. But I think we're closing the gap in that capacity. And it was always going to happen at some point. We were going to have a generation of players that could really go toe-to-toe with Mexico in every single facet of the game. What I find interesting, and I wanted to bring this up on HQ and I forgot, but the first half, when you look at who had more possession, it was us. We had 54% possession. Now, Ian Joy went in there and said it was kind of 50-50, but when you looked at the numbers, 54-46 for us in a half where we didn't necessarily look like we owned it and it felt really hectic and we didn't really establish a rhythm or flow is tremendous. Yeah. And I think needs to be spoken about. I don't want that to go quietly in the night, because that really speaks to our confidence, perhaps, that we are maintaining a little bit more possession than we thought that we did. Now, obviously, there were moments in that first half where I was so frustrated because and this is where I think the evolution of the team is. And maybe I'm answering like 6 of your questions in different ways here.
No. I ask a lot of, I ask a lot of triple-barreled questions where there's just nowhere to go but start talking.
But this is what I think might be happening in our first halves, if I can put my coaching hat on for a second. That we have guys, when we're on the ball, especially when we're eager and have a little bit more energy in the first half, where 2 or 3 guys are ready to go and full attack. And then you have 2 or 3 guys that are maybe sensing it, that's not the right time to do it. And we just feel a little disjointed with that. And then in the second half, when everybody settles in and we can talk a little bit about what we saw in the first half and work through some of those things, we seem to be a little bit more of a well-oiled machine. We get a little bit more efficient in our movements. So I think that maybe gets brought into the equation. But that is going to be part of our evolution. Can we, as a team, decide when to go and when to slow down? And that's a level of tactical understanding that I don't know if we always had at a consistently, I would say. Yeah. Heath, where even though we were playing with Claudio Reyna and John O'Brien and these incredible guys at maintaining rhythm and being deep line playmakers and really knowing the right pass in every situation, I feel like if we're going to really take those next big steps and start to compete with the biggest of nations on a regular basis, knowing how to establish a flow and a rhythm and knowing when to go collectively and when to drop off and having that collective sense of this isn't the right time, let's just keep it. Let's catch our breath. Let's make them suffer a little bit. And then conversely, when another team establishes their rhythm, how quickly can we get that back? And I love talking about that because that gets into more of the why. Why are we making these types of decisions? Why are we going now? And can we solve all these? You can solve a lot of problems with good team shape. And anyway, you just take it from here because I'm going off on a tangent.
No. My take on that is that I think this is the most intelligent generation we've ever had. Because all these kids grew up in professional environments. None of us did, right? True. These kids have reps, they have hours, they have however you declare somebody an expert at something, these players are inching towards that. And in very high level environments, most of them or a lot of them coming through MLS academies, others coming from other academies, but coming through professional environments where they're doing this from a young age. And I'm not saying that's like, I'm not saying single sport from like, I'm not getting into the young age, but I think there is an intelligence to these players. There was times in the game, Jimmy, that I looked at these players going, oh gosh, oh no, he's off balance. He's gonna. I look at Ricardo Pepi almost every time where I'm like, oh man, he's gonna lose the ball. He's he's making a mess of this, and he rolls one back. First minute of the game, rolls one back like a little back heel, and then we spring out on a counterattack. Ball comes into him, and very similarly to top strikers, ball comes into his foot, And with the outside of his foot, he just pops it back to a player and gets on with the game. And you're like, oh, that's something different than I've seen before, right? That simplicity of his game, but knowing that, oh, I've got to hold a guy off. I'm just going to lay it off. And those little tiny details that I look at for a number of players, and it was Weston McKennie a couple times, Yunus Musa, where I'm like, oh, don't play that ball. We don't have that range. We can't slot that ball in. No, we don't do that we don't play that kind of game. And then boom, same Zach Steffen, boom, that slotting that ball through 3-4 players. I'm like, okay, there's something to this group in terms of that quality decision-making and the ability to execute that decision while playing with a very high IQ that I'm really excited about. Obviously, so much of it is raw and unharnessed, sort of unnurtured potential. But when I see that, I'm like, I don't remember seeing some of those types of things.